So a short comment on Little Dorrit. Again, it's one of these, it's going to be better if you just watch the miniseries. There was an excellent miniseries done, 2008. It's currently in Amazon Prime. Highly recommended. Claire Foy plays Little Dorrit. Matthew McFadden, Faden plays the main man, Arthur Clinton. So I just want to make a couple comments about Little Dorrit. As the book, the villains are a little too much of a caricature, but Andy Serkis plays one of the villains in the miniseries and makes it a little more real, which helps. And there's some other stuff, but I want to talk about one of the characters, Flora Finching. Dickens often, or I should say usually, based his characters on people he knew in real life. Some people who knew very well. Often people were not pleased if they recognized themselves in one of his characters because all of his characters have something wrong with them. But in particular, Flora Finching is a caricature of a woman he had a crush on when he was younger, was forbidden to marry, and he ended up marrying his actual wife, and that's a different story. Dickens was not nice to the ladies, and I will leave it at that. But the woman who Flora Finching is based on did recognize herself and was highly offended by it because Flora is a middle-aged, fat, alcoholic, that seems to be a theme, woman who's back living with her father now that she is a widow after having been married to a very rich man. And she is ridiculous. She is putting on airs of behaving like she was when she was a teenager, pretending she is the sweet young thing with frilly things in her head, as opposed to a middle-aged woman who is definitely not pretty anymore. It's sad. And it's mean. It's a very mean caricature. In the miniseries, they make it a little nicer, and they show, and it's true, he did show this in his novel as well, so they didn't just make it up, that Mrs. Finching was a very, very nice woman, and she tries her best. She is flawed, but everybody is flawed. So that's often why the Dickens adaptations work better than the novels themselves, is that Charles Dickens himself was not a nice person. I definitely wouldn't want to be related to him, definitely wouldn't want to be a woman related to him, and his sons didn't get treated much better either, so I can't really say much about that either. One of the interesting things, and it does mention this in the description of the video itself, that the story that the main action is occurring is in the 1820s. You have to realize that is from Dickens' youth. Dickens died in 1870. He was a little kid in the 1820s. The Marshalsea prison, which was a debtor's prison, was active then, and of course his own father and family had to deal with that. But they were long gone by the time Dickens was a famous author. But because it was such a big part of his own life, he used it multiple times in stories which kept pushing his novels back to earlier time periods. So this is why you need to pay attention. A lot of Dickens' novels are actually historical novels, but you don't realize that because he's already an old author to you. But you need to realize when these books came out and when they were very popular, they were not contemporaneous. They were not modern novels. Hard Times was, and some of the other ones were. But a lot of them were set in the past of the good, not the good old days, but the bad old days. So that's kind of interesting to think about. When you read Dickens or you look at these adaptations in film and miniseries, is that which of these books were actually based on what Dickens was dealing with as an adult versus what he was trying to remember from childhood and what really put a stamp on his mind and personality. So the debtors' prisons, as I said, were long gone by the time Dickens was an adult, but it shaped, his point of view for his entire life.